Hello horror lovers, welcome to the channel. Before the terror begins, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, as it will help me a lot. Also, leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from, I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this, because I crouched down to examine them. Cool. But remember what Mom said, no touching any plants or mushrooms we don't know. We continued our trek, the forest growing denser around us. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in dappled patterns, creating an almost magical atmosphere. For a while, we forgot our fear, caught up in the wonder of discovery. Then, a twig snapped somewhere to our left. I froze, my heart suddenly racing. Did you hear that? Tommy nodded, his eyes wide. What was it? Probably just a squirrel or something, I said, trying to sound confident. But as I turned to continue our path, something caught my eye, a glint of metal among the trees. Curiosity overcame caution, and I moved towards it, Tommy trailing behind. As we got closer, my breath caught in my throat. Hidden among the undergrowth was an enormous mechanical contraption. It looked like a massive bear trap, but unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Whoa, Tommy breathed, voicing my own amazement. The trap was easily twice my height, its metal jaws currently open and waiting. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, and parts of it seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly glow. What do you think it's for? Tommy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, unable to tear my eyes away from the bizarre structure. I don't know, but whatever it's meant to catch, it's got to be huge. As we examined the trap, a sense of unease grew in the pit of my stomach. This was no ordinary hunting trap. It seemed almost alive. Maybe we should go home and tell Mom and Dad, Tommy suggested, tugging on my sleeve. Part of me wanted to agree, to run back to the safety of our house and pretend we'd never seen this. But another part, the part that craved adventure and answers, wouldn't let me leave. Just a few more minutes, I said, circling the trap. I want to try and figure out how it works. I reached out to touch the cool metal surface, my fingers tracing the strange symbols. As soon as I made contact, a low hum vibrated through the air, so deep I felt it in my bones. Tommy grabbed my arm, his face pale. Sam, I don't like this. Can we please go? I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility for my little brother. Yeah, you're right. Let's head back. But as we turned to leave, the humming grew louder. The ground beneath our feet began to tremble. Run! I yelled, grabbing Tommy's hand and sprinting back the way we came. Behind us, I heard a terrible grinding noise, like ancient gears coming to life. The forest itself seemed to be waking up, trees creaking and animals fleeing in all directions. We burst out of the tree line into our backyard, gasping for air. The sounds from the forest abruptly stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Tommy and I looked at each other, both pale and shaking. In that moment, I knew our lives had changed forever. We had discovered something extraordinary and terrifying in those woods, something that was never meant to be found. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our yard, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the truth behind that strange trap, no matter what it took. Little did I know our adventure was only just beginning, and the consequences of our discovery would be far greater than I could have ever imagined. The mysterious trap consumed my thoughts as Tommy and I made our way back to the house. The sun had set, and the encroaching darkness seemed to amplify the gravity of our discovery. Sam, Tommy whispered, his voice trembling. What are we going to tell Mom and Dad? I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Maybe we shouldn't tell them anything yet. Not until we know more. Tommy's eyes widened. But what if it's dangerous? Shouldn't they know? I sighed, kneeling to meet his gaze. Look, if we tell them now, they'll never let us go back, and we need to figure out what that thing is. Just give me a couple of days, okay? Reluctantly, Tommy nodded. We entered the house, greeted by the familiar smell of Mom's lasagna. "There you are," Mom called from the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready, go wash up." As we sat around the dinner table, I couldn't focus on the conversation. My mind kept drifting back to the forest, to the massive trap with its strange symbols and otherworldly glow. "Sam? Earth to Sam." Dad's voice snapped me back to reality. "Huh? Sorry, what?" Dad chuckled. "I asked how your day was. You seemed distracted." I forced a smile. "Oh, it was fine. Just thinking about a science project." Tommy shot me a look but kept quiet. After dinner, we retreated to our shared bedroom, closing the door behind us. "I can't believe we're not telling them," Tommy said, flopping onto his bed. I sat at my desk, opening my laptop. "We will, eventually. But first, I want to do some research." Hours passed as I scoured the internet for any information about giant traps or strange forest discoveries. Tommy eventually fell asleep, but I couldn't tear myself away from the screen. As the clock struck midnight, my eyes grew heavy. I finally closed my laptop and crawled into bed, my mind racing with theories and questions. That night, my dreams were filled with dark forests and monstrous shapes. I saw the trap, its jaws snapping shut on some unseen creature. I heard screams that sounded disturbingly like Tommy's voice. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The digital clock on my nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Across the room, Tommy was tossing and turning, mumbling in his sleep. "Tommy," I whispered, shaking him gently. "Wake up, you're having a nightmare." His eyes flew open, filled with terror. "Sam, I saw it. I saw the monster." I sat on the edge of his bed, trying to calm him down. "It's okay, it was just a dream. There's no monster." But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them. The trap we'd found was clearly designed to catch something big. As the first light of dawn crept through our window, I made a decision. "We're going back," I told Tommy. He looked at me, fear and excitement warring in his expression. "Really? When?" "Today, after breakfast. We need to know more." We went through the motions of our morning routine, both of us jittery with anticipation. As soon as we finished eating, we made excuses to our parents about meeting friends and headed for the forest. The woods seemed different in the daylight, less menacing but no less mysterious. We found our way back to the clearing with the trap, our footsteps hushed by the carpet of leaves. "It's still here," Tommy breathed, a mix of relief and apprehension in his voice. I approached the trap cautiously, studying its intricate mechanisms. "Look at these markings," I said, pointing to the strange symbols etched into the metal. "They almost look like some kind of ancient language." Tommy ran his fingers along the cool surface. "Do you think it's really old?" I shook my head. "Parts of it look ancient, but other parts seem, I don't know, almost futuristic. It doesn't make sense." As we examined the trap, I noticed something we'd missed before, a small panel hidden beneath a cluster of ferns. "Hey, check this out," I called to Tommy. He peered over my shoulder as I brushed away the foliage. The panel was made of the same strange metal as the rest of the trap, but it had a more modern look to it, with what appeared to be a keypad and a small screen. "Should we try to open it?" Tommy asked hesitantly. I bit my lip, weighing our options. Curiosity warred with caution in my mind. Finally, I reached out, my finger hovering over the keypad. "Here goes nothing," I murmured. As soon as I touched the panel, a low rumble shook the ground beneath our feet. The trap began to hum, the strange symbols glowing with an eerie light. "Sam!" Tommy cried, grabbing my arm. "What's happening?" Before I could answer, a deafening roar split the air. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. Not quite animal, not quite machine, but something terrifyingly in between. The trees around us began to sway and crack, as if something massive was moving through them. The roar came again, closer this time. "Run!" I yelled, grabbing Tommy's hand and sprinting back towards our house. As we ran, I could hear the sound of pursuit behind us, trees splintering, the earth shaking with massive footsteps. My heart pounded in my chest, fear giving me speed I didn't know I possessed. We burst out of the tree line into our backyard, not stopping until we were safely inside the house. The door locked behind us. Tommy and I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. Through the window, I could see the forest. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. But I knew the truth. We had awakened something ancient, something dangerous. And it was out there, waiting. As night fell, Tommy and I huddled in our room, too terrified to tell our parents what had happened. The weight of our discovery pressed down on us, a secret too big and too frightening to share. Whatever was out there in the forest, whatever we had unleashed, it was just the beginning. And somehow I knew our lives would never be the same again. The next morning dawned gray and misty, as if the forest itself was shrouded in secrecy. I hadn't slept well, plagued by nightmares of monstrous shapes and echoing roars. As I stared out our bedroom window, I could see Tommy's reflection behind me, his face drawn and pale. "We have to go back, don't we?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my stomach churning with a mix of fear and excitement. "We need to know what's out there, Tommy. We started this, and now we have to see it through." Tommy joined me at the window, his eyes scanning the tree line. What if it's still out there, waiting for us? I put my arm around his shoulders, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Then we'll be careful. We'll bring supplies this time, flashlights, food, first aid kit. We'll be prepared." As we gathered our supplies, sneaking items from around the house into our backpacks, I could feel the weight of our secret pressing down on me. Mom called up the stairs, her voice cheerful and oblivious. "Boys, don't forget, we're having dinner at the Johnsons tonight." "Okay, Mom," I called back, exchanging a glance with Tommy. At least our parents wouldn't be expecting us home until late. We slipped out of the house, the cool morning air raising goosebumps on my arms. As we approached the forest edge, I could feel Tommy tensing beside me. "It's okay," I whispered, giving his hand a squeeze. "We're in this together." The forest seemed different today. The usual chorus of birdsong was absent, replaced by an eerie silence. Our footsteps sounded unnaturally loud as we made our way deeper into the woods, following the now familiar path to the clearing. As we neared the site of the trap, I held out my arm, stopping Tommy in his tracks. "Wait," I hissed. "Do you hear that?" A low, rhythmic sound echoed through the trees, a deep, mechanical thrum that seemed to vibrate in my chest. Tommy's eyes widened. "It's coming from the trap." We crept forward, pushing through the underbrush until the clearing came into view. The massive trap stood as we had left it, its metal surface gleaming dully in the filtered sunlight. But now, it was alive with energy. The strange symbols etched into its surface pulsed with an otherworldly light, and the air around it seemed to shimmer and distort. "Sam," Tommy whispered, his voice quavering. "What's happening to it?" I shook my head, unable to tear my eyes away from the spectacle. "I don't know, but I think it's activating." Drawn by an irresistible curiosity, I stepped into the clearing, approaching the trap. The thrumming grew louder, and I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my shoes. "Be careful," Tommy called, hanging back at the edge of the clearing. My hands trembled as I reached out to touch the trap's surface. The metal was warm, almost hot, and I could feel a strange energy coursing through it. The symbols seemed to shift and change under my gaze, as if trying to communicate something just beyond my understanding. Suddenly, my fingers brushed against a hidden seam. With a soft click, a panel slid open, revealing a complex array of circuitry and what looked like ancient, carved stones. "Tommy, come look at this," I called, excitement momentarily overriding my fear. As Tommy cautiously approached, I examined the exposed inner workings of the trap. It was a baffling mix of advanced technology and what appeared to be prehistoric artifacts. None of it made sense, and yet, it all seemed to work together in some incomprehensible way. "What do you think it does?" Tommy asked, peering over my shoulder. Before I could answer, a low growl rumbled through the clearing. It wasn't the mechanical sound of the trap this time. This was something alive, something big, and something very, very close. We froze, our eyes meeting in shared terror. Slowly, we turned towards the source of the sound. At the edge of the clearing stood a creature that defied description. It was massive, easily twice the size of a bear, with a body that seemed to shift between solid matter and shadowy mist. Multiple eyes glowed with an intelligent malevolence, fixed squarely on us. "Sam?" Tommy whimpered, his hand finding mine and squeezing tight. The creature took a step forward, its form becoming more solid. I could see now that it was covered in what looked like ancient armor, fused to its body in a grotesque melding of flesh and metal. The symbols on its armor matched those on the trap, pulsing with the same eerie light. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. This was what the trap had been designed for, this ancient monstrous being that should not exist in our world. And we had woken it up. "Run," I whispered to Tommy, my eyes never leaving the creature. On 3, we run. 1, 2. The creature roared, a sound that shook the very air around us. At that moment, the trap sprang to life, its massive jaws snapping shut with a thunderous clang. The clearing erupted into chaos, trees splintering, the ground shaking, and the deafening roar of the creature as it thrashed against the trap. 3! I screamed, pushing Tommy ahead of me as we bolted from the clearing. We tore through the forest, branches whipping at our faces, the sounds of destruction fading behind us. But even as we ran, I knew this was far from over. We had unleashed something ancient and terrible, something that was never meant to walk in our world. As we burst out of the tree line into our backyard, gasping for air and shaking with adrenaline, I looked at Tommy's terrified face and made a silent vow. I would protect him, no matter what, but I also knew that we couldn't face this alone anymore. It was time to tell our parents the truth. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across our yard. In the growing darkness, I could almost convince myself that what we'd seen wasn't real. But the echoes of that monstrous roar still rang in my ears, a chilling reminder that our ordinary lives had just taken a turn into the extraordinary and the dangerous. The house was dark and quiet when we stumbled inside, our parents still out at the Johnsons' for dinner. Tommy and I collapsed onto the living room couch, both of us trembling and struggling to catch our breath. "Sam?" Tommy whispered, his voice cracking. What was that thing?" I shook my head, still trying to process what we'd seen. "I don't know, Tommy. But whatever it is, it's not from our world." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our experience settling over us like a heavy blanket. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet house. "We have to tell Mom and Dad," Tommy said suddenly, turning to face me with wide, frightened eyes. I nodded slowly. "You're right. This is too big for us to handle alone, but how do we even begin to explain this?" Before Tommy could respond, we heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Our parents were home. Panic gripped me as I realized we were about to face a moment that would change everything. The front door opened, and Mom's voice called out cheerfully, "Boys, we're home!" Tommy and I exchanged a look of shared dread as our parents entered the living room. Their smiles faded as they took in our disheveled appearance and shell-shocked expressions. "What happened?" Dad asked, his voice sharp with concern. "Are you two all right?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Mom, Dad, we need to tell you something important." Over the next hour, Tommy and I recounted everything that had happened over the past few days. We told them about discovering the trap in the forest, about the strange symbols and the hidden panel. And finally, with shaking voices, we described the monstrous creature we had seen that very afternoon. As we spoke, our parents' expressions shifted from disbelief to concern to outright fear. Mom sank onto the couch, her face pale, while Dad paced the room, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "This can't be real," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just not possible." Dad stopped pacing and turned to face us, his expression grave. "Boys, are you absolutely sure about what you saw? This isn't some kind of elaborate prank, is it?" "Dad, I swear," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "Every word is true. We wouldn't make this up." Tommy nodded vigorously beside me, tears welling up in his eyes. "It was real, Dad. It was so scary." A heavy silence fell over the room as our parents absorbed the gravity of the situation. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice tight with controlled fear. "All right, here's what we're going to do. First thing tomorrow morning, I'm calling the police. We'll tell them everything and let them handle this." "But Dad," I protested, "what if they don't believe us? What if that thing is still out there hurting people?" Mom reached out and took my hand, her grip trembling slightly. "Sam, honey, I know you want to help, but this is too dangerous. We need to let the authorities handle it." As if in response to her words, a distant roar echoed through the night, causing us all to freeze. It was faint, but unmistakable. The same terrifying sound we had heard in the forest. Dad rushed to the window, peering out into the darkness. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice tense. Before anyone could respond, the lights in the house flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. A collective gasp filled the room as we huddled together, fear palpable in the air. "Everyone stay calm," Dad said, fumbling for his phone to use as a light. "It's probably just a power outage." But even as he spoke, we could hear it, the sound of something massive moving through the forest behind our house. Trees creaked and snapped, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath our feet. "It's coming," Tommy whimpered, clinging to Mom's arm. I moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. At first I saw nothing but the shadowy outlines of trees. Then, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Something huge was moving at the edge of the forest, its form seeming to shift and change in the darkness. "Dad," I called, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's here." As we huddled together in the darkened living room, the sounds of destruction growing ever closer, I realized that our lives had irrevocably changed. The barrier between our world and whatever realm that creature came from had been breached, and we were now facing a threat beyond anything we could have imagined. A massive shape loomed at the edge of our backyard, its glowing eyes fixed on our house. As it let out another earth-shaking roar, I knew that this was just the beginning of our nightmare. Whatever happened next, our family would have to face it together. The creature took a step toward our house, and I held my breath, wondering if the walls that had always kept us safe would be enough to protect us from this otherworldly monster. As we braced ourselves for what was to come, I couldn't help but think that this was all my fault. If only we had never ventured into those woods. If only we had left that trap undisturbed. But it was too late for regrets now. All we could do was face the consequences of our actions and hope that somehow we would find a way to make it right. The night stretched on endlessly, each second feeling like an eternity as we huddled together in the darkness of our living room. The creature's presence loomed just outside, a palpable weight pressing against the fragile walls of our home. Every creak and groan of the house sent shivers down my spine, my imagination running wild with visions of claws tearing through wood and plaster. "What do we do?" Tommy whispered, his voice trembling. He was curled up against Mom, who held him tightly, her own face pale with fear. Dad, who had been peering out the window, turned to us with a grim expression. "It's still out there, but it's not attacking. It's just watching." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Maybe it can't get in. Maybe the house is safe. As if in answer to my hopeful question, a low, rumbling growl vibrated through the air, causing the windows to rattle in their frames. We all flinched, drawing closer together. "We need to call for help," Mom said, her voice barely audible. "The police, the army, anyone." Dad nodded, pulling out his phone. "No signal," he muttered, his frustration evident. "Whatever that thing is, It must be interfering with the cellular networks. As the hours crawled by, sleep became an impossible luxury. Every sound, every shadow kept us on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all my fault. If only I hadn't been so curious, so reckless. Sam. Tommy's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. What's going to happen to us? I looked at my little brother, seeing the fear and trust in his eyes. I wanted to reassure him, to tell him everything would be okay, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I make promises I wasn't sure I could keep? Instead, I squeezed his hand. We're going to stick together, Tommy. No matter what happens, we face it as a family. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the windows, the oppressive presence outside seemed to recede. Dad cautiously approached the window again, scanning the yard and the edge of the forest. I think it's gone, he said, his voice a mix of relief and disbelief. We all rushed to the windows, desperate to see for ourselves. The yard was a mess of upturned earth and broken branches, but the monstrous creature was nowhere to be seen. Maybe it went back to the forest, Mom suggested, hope creeping into her voice. But as I looked out at the devastation, a chill ran down my spine. Or maybe it's moved on to somewhere else, I said quietly. The implications of my words hung heavy in the air. If the creature had left our property, where had it gone? What kind of havoc could it wreak in a more populated area? Dad's face set in a determined expression. We need to go back to the forest, he said firmly. What? Mom exclaimed, shock evident in her voice. Are you crazy? After what happened last night? Listen, Dad said, turning to face us all. That thing came from the forest. The trap is there. If we want answers, if we want to find a way to stop this, that's where we need to go. I nodded, a spark of determination igniting within me. Dad's right. We started this and we need to finish it. Tommy looked up at me, his eyes wide. You mean, we're going back? I knelt down to his level, placing my hands on his shoulders. You don't have to come if you don't want to, Tommy. You can stay here with Mom. But Tommy shook his head, a fierce look coming into his eyes. No way. We're in this together, remember? Mom looked like she wanted to protest, but something in our expressions must have convinced her. She sighed heavily. All right, but we go prepared this time. And at the first sign of danger, we leave. Agreed? We all nodded solemnly. As we gathered supplies, flashlights, rope, first aid kit, and anything else we thought might be useful, I couldn't shake a feeling of both dread and anticipation. We were heading back into the heart of the mystery, back to where it all began. The forest loomed before us, its shadows seeming deeper and more menacing than ever before. As we stood at its edge, I could feel the weight of our decision pressing down on me. We were about to step into a world where the rules of reality no longer applied, where ancient mysteries and modern nightmares collided. Ready? Dad asked, looking at each of us in turn. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. Ready, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. As we took our first steps into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around us, swallowing us into their shadowy embrace. The trap awaited us somewhere in the depths of these woods, and with it, hopefully, the answers we so desperately sought. But as we ventured deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Something was out there, hidden among the trees, waiting. And I had a sinking feeling that our journey into the heart of this mystery was only just beginning. The sound of a twig snapping somewhere behind us made us all freeze. We turned, peering into the dimness, but saw nothing. Yet the feeling of being observed, of being hunted, only intensified. Whatever we had unleashed, whatever ancient force we had disturbed, it was aware of us now. And as we pressed on towards the clearing where the trap lay, I couldn't help but wonder, were we the hunters now, or the huntee? The forest seemed to close in around us as we made our way deeper into its shadowy heart. Every step felt like a battle against an unseen force, as if the very air was trying to push us back. Dad led the way, his face set in grim determination, while Mom brought up the rear, constantly glancing over her shoulder at the path behind us. "Do you remember where the trap was?" Dad asked, his voice hushed. I nodded, pointing ahead. "It should be just past that ridge of rocks." As we approached the spot, the air grew thick with an eerie stillness. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. It was as if all life had fled from this part of the forest. Suddenly, Tommy grabbed my arm, his eyes wide with fear. "Sam, look," he whispered, pointing to our left. At first, I saw nothing but trees and shadows. Then a flicker of movement caught my eye. Something large was moving through the underbrush just out of sight. "Dad," I hissed, "we're not alone." Dad's hand went to the makeshift weapon he'd fashioned from a broken tree branch. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice tense. We huddled together, our eyes scanning the forest around us. The feeling of being watched intensified, raising goosebumps on my arms. "Maybe we should go back," Mom suggested, her voice trembling slightly. But before anyone could respond, a low growl rumbled through the air. It was the same sound we'd heard the night before, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Run!" Dad yelled, pushing us forward. We sprinted through the forest, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us at every step. The sound of pursuit filled the air, heavy footfalls and splintering wood. As we burst into the clearing where the trap lay, I skidded to a halt, my breath catching in my throat. The massive contraption stood before us, but it was different now. The metal gleamed with an otherworldly light, and the symbols etched into its surface seemed to writhe and shift before my eyes. "What's happening to it?" Tommy gasped, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. Before I could answer, a deafening roar split the air. The creature we'd seen before crashed into the clearing, its massive form seeming to shift and change as it moved. In the daylight, I could see it more clearly, a nightmarish fusion of flesh and metal, ancient and yet somehow futuristic. "Get behind me!" Dad shouted, placing himself between us and the monster, the creature's multiple eyes fixed on us, glowing with intelligent malevolence. It took a step forward, the ground shaking beneath its weight. "The trap," I suddenly realized. "We need to activate the trap." I darted towards the contraption, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature roared again, lunging towards me, but Dad intercepted it, swinging his makeshift weapon. "Sam, hurry!" Mom cried, pulling Tommy close to her. My hands shook as I reached the trap, frantically searching for the hidden panel we'd discovered before. Time seemed to slow down as I heard the sounds of struggle behind me, Dad's grunts of effort, the creature's inhuman snarls. Finally, my fingers found the seam. The panel slid open, revealing the complex array of circuitry and ancient stones. "What do I do?" I yelled, panic rising in my throat. "Look for a way to close the trap," Dad shouted back, his voice strained. I scanned the inner workings of the device, my mind racing. Suddenly, a pattern in the symbols caught my eye. Without fully understanding why, I pressed a sequence of the carved stones. The effect was immediate. The trap hummed to life, energy crackling along its surface. The creature let out a terrifying screech, recoiling from the device. "It's working," Tommy yelled. "Sam, you did it." But our victory was short-lived. As the trap's jaws began to close, the creature lashed out with unexpected speed. Its clawed hand caught Dad, sending him flying across the clearing. "No!" Mom screamed, running to Dad's side. The creature turned its attention back to the trap, its form seeming to blur and distort. To my horror, I realized it was trying to escape, to slip between the closing jaws. "We can't let it get away," I yelled, desperately looking for a way to speed up the trap's mechanism. Tommy suddenly darted forward, snatching up Dad's fallen weapon. Before I could stop him, he ran towards the creature, swinging the branch with all his might. "Tommy, no!" I screamed, my heart in my throat. The branch connected with the creature's shifting form, and for a moment everything seemed to freeze. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing apart, the monster vanished in a blinding flash of light, The trap snapped shut with a thunderous clang, and silence fell over the clearing. I rushed to Tommy, pulling him into a tight hug. "Are you okay? What were you thinking?" He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and awe. I don't know. I just knew I had to do something." We turned to where Mom was helping Dad to his feet. He was battered and bruised, but alive. "Is it over?" Mom asked, her voice shaky. I looked at the now dormant trap, a sense of unease settling in my stomach. "I don't think so," I said slowly. I think we've just opened a door to something much bigger." As we stood there in the clearing, surrounded by the aftermath of our encounter, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The creature may have vanished, but the mystery of its existence and the purpose of the trap remained. What had we truly awakened in these woods? And more importantly, what would we do when it inevitably returned? The journey back home felt surreal, as if we were walking through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Dad leaned heavily on Mom, his face etched with pain from his encounter with the creature. Tommy stayed close to my side, his earlier bravery now replaced by a wide-eyed, shell-shocked expression. As for me, my mind raced, trying to process everything we'd seen and done. As we emerged from the forest's edge into our backyard, the normalcy of our house struck me as absurd. How could the world go on as if nothing had happened when we'd just faced something so impossible? "We need to get your father inside," Mom said, her voice tight with worry. "Sam, can you help me?" I nodded, moving to support Dad's other side. As we made our way into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced back at the forest, half expecting to see glowing eyes peering out from the shadows. Once inside, we settled Dad onto the couch. His shirt was torn, revealing angry red marks where the creature had struck him. "I'll get the first aid kit," Mom said, hurrying to the bathroom. Tommy hovered nervously nearby. "Is Dad going to be okay?" Dad managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine, champ, just a little banged up." But I could see the worry in his eyes, the same worry I felt gnawing at my insides. We'd escaped this time. But what about next time? What if the creature came back? As Mom returned and began tending to Dad's wounds, I paced the living room, unable to shake my restlessness. "We need to tell someone," I blurted out. "The police, the army, someone who can help us deal with this." Mom looked up from bandaging Dad's arm, her expression skeptical. "And tell them what exactly? That we encountered a monster in the woods? That there's a giant, ancient trap hidden in the forest? They'll think we're crazy." "But we have proof," I insisted. "The trap is still there. And Dad's injuries—" "No," Dad interrupted, his voice firm despite his pain. "We can't involve anyone else. Not yet. We don't understand what we're dealing with, and bringing in outsiders could make things worse." I opened my mouth to argue, but the sound of breaking glass cut me off. We all froze, eyes darting to the source of the noise. The kitchen window. "Stay here," Dad said, struggling to his feet despite Mom's protests. But before he could take a step, a low, menacing growl filled the air. It was a sound we'd all come to recognize, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "It followed us home," Tommy whispered, his voice trembling. The creature's massive form appeared in the kitchen doorway, its body seeming to shift and change as it moved. Multiple eyes glowed in the dimness, fixing us with a gaze that seemed to burn with otherworldly intelligence. "Upstairs now," Dad shouted, pushing us towards the staircase. We scrambled up the steps, the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass following close behind. As we reached the second floor, Dad slammed the door to my parents' bedroom shut, bracing himself against it. "The closet," he gasped. "There's a trapdoor to the attic. Go!" Mom hesitated, clearly torn between helping Dad and protecting us. "John!" "Go!" Dad insisted. "I'll hold it off. Get the kids to safety." The door shuddered as something massive slammed into it from the other side. Dad's face contorted with effort as he struggled to keep it closed. With tears in her eyes, Mom ushered Tommy and me into the walk-in closet. She pushed aside a stack of boxes, revealing a small trap door in the ceiling. "Up you go," she said, giving me a boost. I climbed into the dusty, cramped space of the attic, then reached down to help pull Tommy up. As Mom started to climb up herself, a terrifying crash echoed from the bedroom, followed by Dad's shout of pain. "John!" Mom cried, half climbing, half falling back down into the closet. "Mom, no!" I yelled, but she was already rushing back into the bedroom. Tommy and I huddled in the attic, listening to the sounds of struggle below. The creature's inhuman roars mixed with our parents' shouts and the destruction of furniture. "We have to help them," Tommy said, his voice shaking but determined. I nodded, my mind racing. "The trap," I said suddenly. "It reacted to the creature before. Maybe we can use that somehow." "But it's back in the forest," Tommy pointed out. "Not all of it," I replied, remembering the strange stones I'd seen inside the control panel. I grabbed one of those carved rocks before we left. I thought it might be important. I fished the small stone out of my pocket. In the dim light filtering through the attic vents, I could see the strange symbols etched into its surface. "What are we going to do with that?" Tommy asked. Before I could answer, a heart-stopping scream from below made us both flinch. It was Mom's voice, filled with pain and terror. "We have to go down there," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Tommy nodded, his face pale but resolute. Together, I gripped the stone tightly in my hand, feeling its odd warmth against my palm. "Together," I agreed. As we moved towards the trapdoor, I silently prayed that whatever power this small piece of the ancient device held would be enough to save our family. Because if it wasn't, I feared we were about to face a horror beyond anything we'd encountered so far. And this time, there might be no escape. The attic trapdoor creaked as we slowly opened it, the sounds of chaos from below growing louder. Tommy and I exchanged a terrified glance before I nodded, steeling myself for what we might find. We descended into the closet, the air thick with dust and the acrid smell of something burning. As we crept towards the bedroom door, I could hear Mom's labored breathing and Dad's pained groans. "Stay behind me," I whispered to Tommy, gripping the strange stone tightly in my sweating palm. We peered around the doorframe, and the scene that greeted us was one of utter devastation. The bedroom was in ruins, furniture splintered and strewn about. Mom was huddled in one corner, cradling Dad's head in her lap, and there, in the center of the room, loomed the creature. It was even more terrifying up close. Its body seemed to constantly shift and change, as if it couldn't decide on a single form. Multiple eyes swiveled in our direction, and a low, menacing growl rumbled from somewhere deep within its mass. "Sam, Tommy, run!" Mom cried out when she saw us. But running was the furthest thing from my mind. This thing had invaded our home, hurt our parents. It had to be stopped. I stepped into the room, holding the stone out in front of me like a shield. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear and adrenaline. "Remember this?" The creature's eyes fixed on the stone, and for a moment everything went still. Then with a roar that shook the walls, it lunged towards me. "Sam!" Tommy screamed. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the creature's claws extending towards me, saw the terror in my family's eyes. And then, almost instinctively, I pressed my thumb against one of the symbols on the stone. A blinding light erupted from the stone, filling the room. The creature recoiled, its form seeming to waver and distort even more than usual. A high-pitched whine filled the air, making us all wince in pain. "What's happening?" Tommy yelled over the noise. I shook my head, unable to answer. The stone was growing hot in my hand, almost too hot to hold. But I gritted my teeth and kept my grip, somehow knowing that letting go would be disastrous. The creature thrashed about, its form becoming less and less solid. With a sound like reality tearing apart, a swirling vortex appeared in the middle of our bedroom. The pull was immediate and intense. "Hold on to something," Dad shouted, grabbing Mom and bracing himself against the remains of their bed. Tommy latched onto the doorframe, his eyes wide with fear and amazement. I felt myself being dragged towards the vortex, my feet sliding across the floor. "Sam!" Mom cried out, reaching for me. But I knew I couldn't let go of the stone. Whatever was happening, it was our only chance to stop this creature. The monster let out one final, earth-shattering roar before it was sucked into the vortex. The pull intensified, and I felt my feet leave the ground. "No!" Tommy yelled, lunging forward and grabbing my arm. For a moment, we hung suspended between our world and whatever lay beyond that swirling portal. Then, with a burst of strength I didn't know he possessed, Tommy pulled me back. We collapsed to the floor as the vortex imploded with a thunderous boom. And then suddenly, everything was quiet. I lay there, gasping for breath, the stone now cool in my hand. Tommy was sprawled beside me, his chest heaving. Is it over?" he panted. Slowly, carefully, we all looked around the devastated room. There was no sign of the creature. "I think so," Dad said, his voice weak but relieved. "For now, at least." Mom rushed over to us, pulling Tommy and me into a tight embrace. "Oh, my brave boys," she sobbed. "What were you thinking?" I couldn't answer. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything that had just happened. We'd faced the creature again, and somehow we'd survived. But as I looked down at the stone in my hand, I knew this was far from over. "We need to talk," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "About everything. The trap, the creature, the stone. All of it." Dad nodded gravely, wincing as he tried to sit up straighter. "You're right, Sam. No more secrets, no more trying to handle this on our own. We're in this together, and we need to figure out what we're truly dealing with." As we gathered ourselves, preparing to sift through the wreckage of our home and our normal lives, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just taken our first real step into a much larger, much more dangerous world. The creature was gone, but the mystery remained. And somewhere out there, in the depths of the forest or beyond, I knew it was waiting to return, waiting to finish what it had started. "So," Tommy said, his voice small but determined, "what do we do now?" I looked at each member of my family in turn, seeing the fear in their eyes but also the resolve. Whatever came next, we would face it together. "Now," I said, holding up the stone, "we find answers, and we prepare. Because something tells me this is only the beginning." As night fell outside our shattered window, we huddled together, ready to unravel the mystery that had turned our lives upside down. Little did we know, our journey into the unknown was about to take an even more extraordinary turn. The morning light filtered through the hastily boarded-up windows, casting eerie shadows across our living room. We had spent the night downstairs, too shaken to return to the devastated bedrooms. Dad winced as he shifted on the couch, his injuries a stark reminder of the previous night's encounter. "All right," Mom said, her voice tired but determined. "It's time we pooled our knowledge, no more holding back." I nodded, placing the strange stone on the coffee table. It sat there, innocuous yet somehow menacing in its quiet power. "This stone," I began, "it's part of the trap we found in the forest. When I activated it last night, it seemed to create some kind of portal." "A portal?" Tommy's eyes widened. "Like to another dimension?" Dad leaned forward, his face etched with concern. "Let's not jump to conclusions, but clearly this stone, and by extension the trap, is more than just some ancient artifact. It's technology," I said, the realization hitting me. "Advanced technology disguised as something primitive." Mom shook her head, disbelief clear in her eyes. "But who would create such a thing? And why hide it in our forest?" A heavy silence fell over the room as we all contemplated the implications. The creature, the trap, the stone, it all pointed to something far beyond our understanding. "We need to go back," I said finally. "Back to the trap. Maybe there are more clues there, something we missed before." "Absolutely not," Mom protested. "It's too dangerous. We barely survived last night." Dad held up a hand, his expression thoughtful. "Sarah, I understand your concern. But Sam's right. We need answers. And right now, that trap is our only lead. But what if the creature comes back? Tommy asked, his voice small. I picked up the stone, feeling its weight in my hand. We have this. It worked against the creature before. If we can figure out how to control it properly, we might be able to defend ourselves. Mom looked from Dad to me, then to Tommy. I could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Finally, she sighed. I don't like this. But I like the idea of sitting here waiting for that thing to return even less. If we're doing this, we do it together. We spent the next hour gathering supplies, flashlights, first aid kit, snacks, and anything else we thought might be useful. As we prepared to leave, I caught Tommy staring at the boarded-up window. You okay? I asked, putting a hand on his shoulder. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. What if we can't stop it, Sam? What if it keeps coming back? I squeezed his shoulder, wishing I had a better answer. Then we'll keep fighting. Together. As we stepped out of the house, the forest loomed before us, its shadows seeming deeper and more menacing than ever before. We made our way through the trees, every snapping twig and rustling leaf setting our nerves on edge. Finally, we reached the clearing where the trap lay. It stood there, silent and imposing, its metal surface gleaming dully in the filtered sunlight. It looks different, Mom said, her voice hushed. She was right. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to shift and change as we watched, never quite settling into a recognizable pattern. Dad approached it cautiously, his hand outstretched. It's humming, he said. Can you feel it? Like it's alive. I stepped forward, the stone warm in my hand. As I got closer to the trap, the stone began to pulse with a soft light, responding to the larger device. Sam, be careful, Mom warned. But something was pulling me forward, an instinct I couldn't explain. I placed my hand on the trap's surface, and suddenly, the world around us changed. The forest dissolved, replaced by a vast, star-filled space. Holographic images sprang to life around us. Strange creatures, advanced machines, and landscapes that couldn't possibly exist on Earth. What is this? Tommy gasped, reaching out to touch one of the images only to have his hand pass right through it. It's a database, I said, the knowledge somehow flooding into my mind. A record of everything. Everything? Dad asked, his voice filled with awe. You mean? I nodded, my head spinning with the influx of information. Other worlds, other dimensions. The creature we saw, it's just one of many. And this trap, it's not a trap at all. It's a gateway. A gateway to where? Mom asked, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, a new image appeared before us. It showed Earth, but not as we knew it. Strange structures dotted the landscape, and in the sky above, massive ships hovered ominously. To our future, I whispered, the terrible truth settling over us like a shroud. A future where Earth has been invaded. The image zoomed in, showing humans fighting alongside beings that looked similar to the creature we had encountered. They were battling against a force of mechanized warriors, their weapons far beyond anything we could imagine. This can't be real, Mom said, shaking her head in denial. But deep down, we all knew it was. The trap, the stone, the creature, they were all part of something much bigger than we could have ever imagined. So what do we do now? Tommy asked, his voice small but steady. I looked at my family, seeing the fear in their eyes, but also the determination. We had stumbled upon something world-changing, something that could alter the course of human history. Now, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. We prepare, we learn, and when the time comes, we fight. As the holographic images swirled around us, showing glimpses of battles yet to come and worlds beyond our own, I realized our simple life in the forest was over. A new chapter was beginning, one filled with danger, discovery, and the fate of our entire world hanging in the balance. Together, Dad said, putting his arm around Mom. Together, we all echoed, joining hands as we stood in the center of the universe's greatest secrets. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the monumental shift that had just occurred. Our journey had only just begun, and the true scale of our adventure was only now becoming clear. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it as a family, armed with knowledge from beyond the stars and the unbreakable bond between us. The holographic images faded away, leaving us standing in the forest, clearing once more. The weight of what we'd just learned hung heavily in the air. For a moment, we all stood in stunned silence, trying to process the enormity of the situation. Dad was the first to speak. "We need to get back to the house. It's not safe out here, and we have a lot to discuss." As we made our way back through the forest, the once familiar trees now seemed alien and threatening. Every shadow could be hiding an interdimensional creature, every rustle of leaves a harbinger of an impending invasion. "Sam?" Tommy whispered as we walked. "Do you really think we can stop an alien invasion? We're just us." I squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "We might be just us, but we're the only ones who know what's coming. That has to count for something." Back at the house, we gathered around the kitchen table. Mom busied herself making tea, her hands shaking slightly as she poured hot water into mugs. "Okay," Dad said, his voice steady despite the worry lines creasing his forehead. "Let's break this down. What exactly did we learn from that database?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize the flood of information in my mind. The trap isn't just a containment device. It's a gateway to other dimensions, other worlds. The creatures we've encountered are refugees, fleeing from something even worse. "The mechanical warriors," Mom murmured, setting the mugs on the table. I nodded. "They're called the Nexus. From what I could gather, they're an AI race bent on conquering every dimension they can access. Earth is just their next target." "But why here? Why now?" Dad asked, his hands wrapped tightly around his mug. "The gateway," I explained. "Earth is a nexus point, a place where multiple dimensions intersect. If the Nexus can control Earth, they can spread to countless other worlds." Tommy leaned forward, his eyes wide. "So the creatures we've seen, they're not the bad guys?" "Not exactly," I said. "They're desperate. They've lost their homes to the Nexus, and now they're looking for a new place to live. But their presence here is drawing the Nexus's attention to Earth." Mom shook her head, disbelief clear on her face. "This is, it's too much. How are we supposed to deal with this? We should be calling the authorities, the military." "And tell them what?" Dad interjected. "That we've discovered an interdimensional gateway in our backyard and an alien invasion is coming? They'd think we're crazy." "Besides," I added, "the database showed multiple possible futures. In some of them, government involvement made things worse. Panic, martial law, global chaos. It played right into the Nexus's hands." A heavy silence fell over the table as we all contemplated the weight of our knowledge and responsibility. "So what do we do?" Tommy asked, his voice small but determined. I pulled out the stone, setting it on the table. "We learn. We prepare. This stone is a key to the gateway. If we can figure out how to use it properly, we might be able to control who and what comes through." Dad nodded slowly. "And maybe find allies. You said there were creatures fighting against the Nexus in that future vision, right?" "Right," I confirmed. "But we'd be bringing them to our world, asking them to fight a war that isn't theirs." "Isn't it, though?" Mom said, surprising us all. "If the Nexus is a threat to all dimensions, then this is everyone's war." I felt a surge of pride at my mother's words. Despite her fear, she was facing this head-on. "We'll need to be careful," Dad cautioned. "We can't just open portals willy-nilly. We need a plan." "First things first," I said. "We need to understand this technology better. The stone, the gateway, they're beyond anything we've ever dealt with." Tommy perked up. "Maybe we could find someone to help, a scientist or something?" Dad shook his head. Too risky. We don't know who we can trust. For now, this stays between us. But we're just a family, Mom protested. How are we supposed to save the world? I reached out, placing my hand over hers. We're not just a family anymore. We're the first line of defense against an interdimensional invasion. It's not about saving the world. It's about giving humanity a fighting chance. As we sat there, the weight of our new reality settling over us, a determined silence filled the room. We were no longer just the Andersons. We were Earth's unlikely guardians, keepers of a secret that could change the fate of our entire dimension. So, Tommy said, breaking the silence, when do we start? Dad looked at each of us in turn, his expression a mix of pride and resolve. We already have. From this moment on, everything changes. We train, we learn, we prepare, and when the time comes, we stand together. As the sun began to set outside our window, casting long shadows across the kitchen, we raised our mugs in a solemn toast. To family, to Earth, to the battles yet to come. Our ordinary lives were over, replaced by an extraordinary mission that would push us to our limits and beyond. The invasion was coming, but we would be ready. The weeks following our discovery flew by in a blur of preparation and research. Our house had become a makeshift command center, with maps, notes, and diagrams covering every available surface. The stone sat at the center of it all, a constant reminder of the incredible responsibility we now bore. One humid afternoon, I found myself poring over a set of symbols I'd copied from the gateway. The kitchen table was strewn with papers, my laptop open to a translation program I'd been tinkering with. "Any progress?" Dad asked, entering the room with a mug of coffee in hand. I sighed, running a hand through my disheveled hair. "Some. I think I've identified a pattern in the symbols, but translating them is another matter entirely." Dad pulled up a chair, studying the papers spread before me. "It's incredible, isn't it? An entirely alien language right here in our kitchen." "Incredible and frustrating," I admitted. "I feel like we're running out of time, but I don't even know how much time we have." Before Dad could respond, Tommy burst into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. "Guys, come quick, I think I found something." We followed him to the living room where Mom was already waiting. Tommy had set up an old ham radio on a side table, its dials glowing softly. "I've been scanning different frequencies," Tommy explained, his words tumbling out in a rush. "And I picked up something weird. Listen." He turned a dial, and a strange, rhythmic pulsing filled the room. It wasn't quite sound, wasn't quite static. It was something in between, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "What is that?" Mom asked, her voice hushed. I leaned in closer, my mind racing. It's similar to the frequency the stone emits when it's active." "Tommy, you're a genius." My little brother beamed with pride. "So what does it mean?" Dad's expression was grave. "It means we're not the only ones who know about the gateway. Someone, or something, is trying to communicate through it. Or activate it," I added, a chill running down my spine. Mom stood up, her jaw set with determination. "We need to go back to the clearing. If someone's trying to open the gateway from the other side, we need to be there to meet them," I finished. Within minutes, we had gathered our supplies, the stone, some makeshift weapons Dad had crafted, and Tommy's portable radio. As we stepped out of the house, the forest seemed to loom before us, darker and more foreboding than ever. "Stay close," Dad warned as we made our way through the trees. The pulse from the radio grew stronger as we approached the clearing, its rhythm becoming more urgent. When we finally reached the gateway, we all gasped in unison. The massive structure was humming with energy, its surface rippling like water. Symbols raced across its surface, too fast for the eye to follow. "It's activating," I breathed, pulling out the stone. It was warm to the touch, pulsing in sync with the gateway. "What do we do?" Tommy asked, his voice trembling slightly. Before anyone could answer, a blinding light erupted from the center of the gateway. We shielded our eyes, bracing ourselves for whatever was about to come through. As the light faded, we lowered our arms, blinking spots from our vision. There, standing before the gateway, was a figure unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin shimmered with an iridescent sheen. Multiple eyes blinked at us from a face that seemed to shift and change as we watched. When it spoke, its voice resonated in our minds rather than our ears. "Greetings, Guardians of Earth," it said. "I am Zarthul, emissary of the Resistance. We've been searching for you." For a moment, we all stood in stunned silence. Then Dad stepped forward, his voice steady despite the extraordinary situation. We're the Anderson family. Are you here to help us?" Zarthul's eyes, all of them, blinked in what might have been surprise. "You are not what we expected, but yes, we are here to help. The Nexus approaches, and Earth's gateway must be protected at all costs." I found my voice stepping up beside Dad. "We've seen visions of the invasion, but we don't know how to stop it. We barely understand how any of this works." The alien emissary nodded, a gesture that looked oddly human on its otherworldly form. "That is why we are here. To teach, to prepare, to stand with you against the coming storm." "How much time do we have?" Mom asked, her arm protectively around Tommy's shoulders. Zarthul's form shimmered, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of fear in its ever-changing eyes. "Less than you hope, more than you fear. But every moment counts. Are you ready to begin your true training, Guardians of Earth?" We looked at each other, a silent communication passing between us. This was it. The moment our lives would change irrevocably. There would be no going back, no pretending this wasn't happening. We were about to step into a war that spanned dimensions, armed with nothing but our determination and the guidance of an alien ally. Dad squared his shoulders, speaking for all of us. "We're ready, whatever it takes to protect our home." As Zarthul nodded in approval, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration coursing through me. Our ordinary lives were over, replaced by an extraordinary destiny. The fate of Earth, of all dimensions, now rested in the hands of a single family from a small town. The real challenge was just beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of activity and information. Zarthul had set up a temporary base in the clearing, using technology that boggled our minds. A shimmering dome now encased the area, rendering it invisible to the outside world. Inside, we trained relentlessly. Physical combat, mental exercises, and most importantly, learning to harness the power of the Gateway Stone. "Focus, Sam." Zarthul's voice echoed in my mind as I struggled to maintain a connection with the stone. "Feel the energy flowing through you. Become one with the multiversal current." I gritted my teeth, sweat beading on my forehead. The stone hovered inches above my palm, pulsing with an otherworldly light. For a moment, I thought I had it under control, but then it clattered to the ground, the light fading. "I can't do it," I panted, frustration evident in my voice. Dad placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You're getting better, son. Rome wasn't built in a day, and interdimensional warriors aren't trained overnight." Zarthul's form shimmered, a gesture we'd come to recognize as agreement. "Your father speaks wisely. Your progress is remarkable for beings of your dimension." Nearby, Mom and Tommy were engrossed in their own training. Mom had shown a surprising aptitude for deciphering the alien language of the Gateway, while Tommy's quick reflexes made him a natural at manipulating the energy fields Zarthul had taught us to generate. "Hey, Sam," Tommy called out, a mischievous grin on his face. "Watch this." He concentrated, and a small ball of swirling energy formed between his hands. With a flick of his wrists, he sent it flying towards a target Zarthul had set up. The ball exploded on impact, leaving a scorch mark on the bullseye. "Impressive," Zarthul commented. "But remember, young one, this is not a game. The powers you're learning to control can be devastating in the wrong hands." Tommy's grin faded slightly, replaced by a more serious expression. I know, I'm sorry, it's just... Sometimes I need to remind myself that this is real, you know? I understood exactly what he meant. Despite weeks of training, part of me still felt like I was living in a dream, or a nightmare. Mom looked up from the holographic display she'd been studying. Zarthul, I think I've identified a pattern in these gateway coordinates. Could this help us predict where the Nexus might strike first? Our alien mentor glided over to her, its multiple eyes scanning the display. Excellent work, Sarah. This could indeed prove crucial in our defense strategy. Dad beamed with pride. That's my girl. Always was the smartest one in the family. As we gathered around to examine Mom's discovery, a shrill alarm suddenly pierced the air. Zarthul's form flickered, its usual iridescence turning a deep, alarming red. We have a breach, it announced, its mental voice tinged with urgency. A Nexus scout has penetrated this dimension's outer defenses. Fear and adrenaline surged through me. Here? Now? But we're not ready. Ready or not, the time has come, Zarthul replied. This is not a full invasion force, but a reconnaissance unit. We must intercept it before it can report back to the main Nexus army. Dad immediately switched into action mode. What's the plan? Where is it? Zarthul waved a shimmering appendage, and a 3D map of our area appeared in the air. A pulsing red dot marked a location about 5 miles from our position. We must move quickly, Zarthul instructed. Sam, Tommy, you will come with me. Your parents will remain here to monitor the gateway and coordinate our movements. Mom started to protest, but Dad placed a calming hand on her arm. They've been training for this, Sarah. We have to trust them. I swallowed hard, trying to quell the fear rising in my throat. This was it, our first real confrontation with the enemy we'd been preparing to face. Tommy's face was pale, but his jaw was set with determination. We can do this, right, Sam? I nodded, hoping I looked more confident than I felt. Together, little brother, just like we practiced. As we prepared to leave, gathering the weapons and tech Zarthul had provided, Mom pulled us into a tight hug. Be careful out there. Remember your training, and watch out for each other. Dad's eyes were misty as he clasped our shoulders. You've got this, boys. We believe in you. With final nods to our parents, Tommy and I followed Zarthul to the edge of the clearing. The alien emissary turned to us, its form pulsing with energy. Are you ready, young guardians of Earth? It asked. I gripped the gateway stone tightly, feeling its warmth pulsing in sync with my racing heart. Tommy's hand found mine, squeezing it reassuringly. We're ready, I answered, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. As we stepped out of the protective dome and into the forest beyond, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Our training was over. The real battle was about to begin. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. The fate of our world, perhaps all worlds, now rested in the hands of 2 ordinary kids from a small town. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and absolutely real. The hunt for the Nexus scout had begun. The forest was unnaturally quiet as we moved through it, following Zarthul's lead. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot in the eerie silence. Tommy and I exchanged nervous glances, our hands tight on the alien weapons Zarthul had provided, sleek, almost organic-looking devices that pulsed with a soft blue light. Remember, Zarthul's voice echoed in our minds, the Nexus Scout will appear mechanical, but do not be fooled. It is a highly advanced AI capable of adapting to any situation. Stay alert. I nodded, trying to calm my racing heart. How will we know when we're close? As if in answer to my question, a high-pitched whine suddenly filled the air. Tommy winced, covering his ears. What is that? He hissed. Zarthul's form shimmered with tension. The scout. It's scanning the area. We must move quickly before it detects us. We picked up the pace, half running through the underbrush. The whining grew louder, setting my teeth on edge. Then suddenly we burst into a small clearing. And there it was. The Nexus Scout was like nothing I'd ever seen. It hovered about 6 feet off the ground, its body a constantly shifting mass of metallic tendrils and glowing nodes. Multiple sensor arrays protruded from its core, sweeping the area with beams of pulsing light. "Holy cow," Tommy whispered, his eyes wide. The Scout's sensors suddenly swiveled in our direction. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze. Then all hell broke loose. "Evasive maneuvers," Zarthul shouted, its mental voice urgent. We scattered as the Scout unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. Trees exploded into splinters around us, the air filling with smoke and the acrid smell of ozone. I dove behind a fallen log, my heart pounding. "Tommy," I yelled. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," came his reply from somewhere to my left. "What do we do?" Zarthul's voice cut through the chaos. "Use your training. Connect with your weapons. Feel the energy flow." Taking a deep breath, I focused on the alien device in my hands. I felt it respond, warming to my touch, its energy synchronizing with my own. "Now, Sam," Zarthul commanded. I leaped up from behind the log, raising my weapon. Time seemed to slow as I aimed, feeling the energy building. With a thought, I released it. A bolt of crackling blue energy shot from the weapon, striking the Nexus Scout dead center. It reeled back, its metallic tendrils flailing. "Nice shot," Tommy cheered, popping up from his hiding spot to fire his own weapon. The Scout, damaged but far from defeated, let out a piercing electronic shriek. Its form began to shift and change, adapting to our attacks. "It's reconfiguring," Zarthul warned. "We must end this quickly." I nodded, an idea forming. "Tommy, remember the synchronized attack we practiced?" My brother's eyes lit up with understanding. "On 3? 1, I began, readying my weapon. 2, Tommy continued, mirroring my stance. 3, we shouted together. We fired simultaneously, our energy beams converging on the Scout. At the same moment, Zarthul released a pulse of its own alien energy. The combined assault hit the Nexus Scout like a tsunami. For a moment it hung suspended in the air, its form rippling with conflicting energies. Then, with a sound like reality tearing apart, it imploded. The resulting shockwave knocked us off our feet. When the dust settled, all that remained of the Scout was a small, smoldering crater. We did it," Tommy said, his voice filled with disbelief and excitement. I helped him to his feet, my own hands shaking with adrenaline. "Yeah, we did." Zarthul glided over to us, its form shimmering with what I'd come to recognize as approval. "Well done, young Guardians. You have faced your first test and emerged victorious." But as the initial elation of our victory faded, a sobering thought occurred to me. "Zarthul," I asked, "if this was just a scout, what will happen when the full invasion force arrives?" Our alien mentor's form darkened slightly. "The battle we've won today is but a small skirmish in the war to come. The Nexus will have detected the loss of their scout. They will know Earth is protected, and they will come in greater numbers." Tommy's face paled. "How long do we have?" "Not long," Zarthul replied grimly. "Days, perhaps. We must accelerate your training and prepare Earth's defenses." As we made our way back to our base, the weight of our responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. We had won this fight, but the real war was just beginning. "Sam," Tommy said quietly as we walked, "do you think we can really do this? Save the world, I mean?" I looked at my little brother, seeing the mix of fear and determination in his eyes. Then I glanced at Zarthul, gliding silently ahead of us, carrying the hopes of not just Earth but countless other worlds. "I don't know, Tommy," I answered honestly, "but I know we have to try. We're Earth's guardians now. It's up to us." As we reached the edge of our hidden base, I saw Mom and Dad rushing to meet us, relief evident on their faces. I realized then that we weren't just fighting for the world. We were fighting for our family, for every family. The Nexus was coming, and we would be ready. Because we had to be. The fate of everything depended on it. The days following our encounter with the Nexus Scout were a blur of intense preparation. Our hidden base had become a hive of activity, with Zarthul pushing us to our limits and beyond. The weight of our impending confrontation with the full Nexus force hung heavily in the air. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our camp, I found myself standing at the edge of the protective dome, gazing out at the forest beyond. The world looked so peaceful, so normal. It was hard to believe that in a matter of days, it could all be changed forever. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Dad's voice broke through my reverie. I turned to see him approach, his face etched with a mixture of pride and concern. "Just thinking about what's coming," I replied. "It's all happening so fast." Dad nodded, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I know, son, it's a lot to take in. But you and Tommy, you've amazed us all with how quickly you've adapted." "Do you think it'll be enough?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me. Before Dad could answer, Zarthul's mental voice resonated around us. "Guardians, assemble at the command center. We have urgent news." Exchanging worried glances, Dad and I hurried to the center of our base. Mom and Tommy were already there, gathered around a holographic display that Zarthul had set up. "What's going on?" Mom asked, her voice tense. Zarthul's form shimmered with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "Our long-range sensors have detected a massive energy surge. The Nexus invasion force has entered our solar system." A collective gasp went through our family. Tommy's face paled. "How long do we have?" "At their current speed, they will reach Earth in approximately 48 hours. Zarthul replied grimly. The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. In just 2 days, we would be facing an alien invasion force capable of conquering entire dimensions. Dad, ever the practical one, was the first to recover. "What's our plan? How do we prepare?" Zarthul waved a shimmering appendage, and the holographic display changed to show a map of our area. "We must activate the dormant defense grid hidden within Earth's gateway network. Sam, Tommy, your connection to the gateway stone will be crucial for this task." I nodded, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "What do we need to do?" "You and Tommy will need to journey to 3 key gateway nodes," Zarthul explained, highlighting points on the map. "At each node, you must use the stone to activate the ancient defenses left by my people eons ago." "And what about us?" Mom asked, gesturing to herself and Dad. "You will remain here to coordinate the defense," Zarthul replied. "We must also alert human authorities to the impending threat, though we must be cautious about how much we reveal." The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Tommy and I packed supplies and weapons while Mom and Dad worked on crafting a message that would warn the world's leaders without causing widespread panic. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over our camp, we prepared to set out on our mission. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders as I double-checked our gear. "Sam?" Tommy's voice was small, uncertain. "What if we can't do it? What if we fail?" I turned to my little brother, seeing the fear in his eyes. For a moment, I was tempted to offer empty reassurances, but we'd been through too much for that. "Then we'll go down fighting," I said, gripping his shoulder. "But we're not going to fail. You know why? Because we're the Anderson brothers, and saving the world is what we do now." A small smile tugged at Tommy's lips. "Yeah, I guess it is." Mom and Dad approached, their faces a mixture of pride and worry. Mom pulled us both into a tight hug. "Be careful out there, my brave boys," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dad clasped our shoulders, his eyes shining. "You can do this. We believe in you." As we prepared to step outside the protective dome, Zarthul floated over to us. "Remember your training, young guardians. The fate of not just Earth but countless worlds rests in your hands." I nodded, feeling the comforting weight of the gateway stone in my pocket. "We won't let you down, Zarthul. We won't let anyone down." With final waves to our parents, Tommy and I stepped out of the base and into the forest beyond. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, a beautiful sight that might soon be lost forever if we failed. As we set off towards the first gateway node, I couldn't help but marvel at how much our lives had changed. Just weeks ago, we were ordinary kids in a small town. Now we were Earth's last line of defense against an interdimensional invasion. "Hey, Sam," Tommy said as we walked, a hint of his old mischief in his voice. "Think this'll get us out of our history test next week?" Despite the gravity of our situation, I found myself laughing. "If we pull this off, little brother, I think we'll have made enough history to last a lifetime." With the weight of the world on our shoulders and the clock ticking down to invasion, we pressed on. The greatest challenge of our lives, of any life on Earth, lay ahead. But we were ready. We had to be. The Andersons were going to war, and the fate of everything hung in the balance. The sun had reached its zenith as Tommy and I approached the first gateway node. According to Zarthol's map, it was hidden deep within a cave system in the mountains bordering our town. The entrance loomed before us, a dark maw in the rocky face of the cliff. "Well, this isn't ominous at all," Tommy muttered, his attempted humor barely masking his nervousness. I pulled out a pair of high-tech flashlights Zarthul had provided us. "Stay close," I said, handing one to Tommy. "We don't know what kind of defenses this place might have." As we entered the cave, the temperature dropped noticeably. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing strange, shimmering patterns on the walls. They seemed to pulse with an inner light responding to our presence. "Sam," Tommy whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the cavern. "Do you feel that? It's like the air is alive." I nodded, feeling the same strange energy coursing through me. The gateway stone in my pocket grew warm as if awakening. Suddenly a tremor ran through the cave. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" Tommy asked, his eyes wide with alarm. Before I could answer, a deep, resonant voice filled the air. It spoke in a language I'd never heard before, yet somehow I understood its meaning. "Seekers of the gateway, prove your worth or turn back." I exchanged a glance with Tommy, seeing my own determination reflected in his eyes. "We've come too far to turn back now," I said. "Whatever test this is, we face it together." As if in response to my words, the cave wall before us shimmered and parted, revealing a vast chamber beyond. In its center stood a pedestal, atop which rested a device that looked remarkably similar to our gateway stone. We stepped into the chamber, and immediately, holographic projections sprang to life around us. They showed scenes of devastation, worlds consumed by the Nexus, civilizations crumbling, entire realities being erased. Is this what will happen if we fail?" Tommy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The mysterious voice spoke again. "This is what has been, what is, and what may yet be. The multiverse stands on the brink of annihilation. Are you prepared to bear the burden of its salvation?" I felt the weight of that responsibility settle on my shoulders, heavier than ever before. But looking at Tommy, seeing the mix of fear and determination in his eyes, I knew we couldn't back down. "We are," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Then approach the keystone and prove your connection to the gateways," the voice commanded. Taking a deep breath, I walked towards the pedestal, the gateway stone pulsing warmly in my hand. As I neared the keystone, both stones began to glow brighter, resonating with each other. "Sam," Tommy called out, a note of warning in his voice. "Something's happening." I turned to see the holographic images changing, coalescing into a swirling vortex of energy. From its depths emerged a figure, a being of pure light, its form constantly shifting and changing. "I am the guardian of this node," it announced. "To activate the ancient defenses, you must demonstrate your mastery over the gateway energies. Fail, and this node will be forever sealed." My heart raced. This was it. the moment all our training had been leading up to. "What must we do?" I asked. The Guardian waved its hand, and 3 spheres of pulsing energy appeared in the air. "Direct these energies to their corresponding receptacles," it explained, indicating 3 points around the chamber. "But be warned, the energies are volatile and will resist your control." I looked at Tommy, seeing the determination in his eyes. "Together?" I asked. He nodded, a grin spreading across his face despite the gravity of the situation. "Just like those video games we used to play. Only, with the fate of the multiverse at stake." We positioned ourselves on either side of the energy spheres. I could feel their power, wild and untamed, pushing against my mind. "Remember what Zarthul taught us," I called out to Tommy. "Feel the energy, become one with it." Closing my eyes, I reached out with my mind, connecting with the nearest sphere. It fought against me, its energy chaotic and resistant. But slowly, drawing on everything I'd learned, I began to guide it towards its receptacle. I heard Tommy grunt with effort beside me, felt the air crackle with power. Opening my eyes, I saw him guiding his own sphere, his face a mask of concentration. The chamber filled with blinding light as we worked, the very air seeming to vibrate with energy. With a final push of will, I directed my sphere into its receptacle. A moment later, Tommy did the same with his. There was a moment of breathless silence, then a low hum filled the air. The keystone on the pedestal began to glow brighter and brighter. The Guardian's voice rang out, filled with approval. "Well done, young ones. You have proven yourselves worthy. The defenses of this node are now active." Relief washed over me, so intense it made my knees weak. "We did it," I breathed, barely believing it myself. Tommy whooped with joy, pulling me into a hug. "1 down, 2 to go. The Nexus doesn't stand a chance against the Anderson brothers." As the chamber began to fade around us, returning to its dormant state, I couldn't help but smile at Tommy's enthusiasm. We had passed the first test, activated the first node. Hope, warm and bright, blossomed in my chest. But as we made our way out of the cave, that hope was tempered by the knowledge of what lay ahead. 2 more nodes awaited us, and time was running short. The Nexus invasion force drew ever closer. Our journey was far from over. But for now, we had won a crucial victory. As we stepped back into the sunlight, I felt more ready than ever to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The fate of the multiverse hung in the balance, and we were rising to meet it. The journey to the second gateway node was more challenging than we had anticipated. Zarthul's map led us deep into a dense, swampy area that seemed to actively resist our every step. The air was thick with humidity, and strange bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow over the murky waters. "I don't like this, Sam," Tommy said, swatting at a mosquito the size of a small bird. "It feels like the whole swamp is watching us." I nodded, feeling the same unease. "Stay alert. We don't know what kind of defenses this node might have." As if in response to my words, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees. We froze, our hands instinctively moving to our weapons. "Please tell me that was your stomach," Tommy whispered, his eyes wide. Before I could respond, the water beside us exploded upward. A massive reptilian creature emerged, its scales gleaming with an unnatural metallic sheen. Its eyes glowed with an intelligence that sent chills down my spine. "Intruders," it hissed, its voice a strange mix of organic and mechanical. "You dare to seek the gateway?" I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're here to activate the node's defenses. The Nexus is coming and we need to protect Earth." The creature's eyes narrowed, studying us intently. "Many have come claiming noble intentions. Few have proven worthy." "We've already activated 1 node," Tommy chimed in, a hint of pride in his voice. "We're the Guardians chosen by Zarthul." At the mention of Zarthul's name, the creature's demeanor changed. It lowered its massive head, bringing one glowing eye level with us. "Zarthul lives, after all this time?" I nodded, pulling out the gateway stone as proof. He's helping us prepare for the Nexus invasion. The creature was silent for a long moment, its gaze fixed on the stone. Finally, it spoke again. Very well. If Zarthul has chosen you, then you may approach the node. But be warned, the test that awaits you is not for the faint of heart. With a sweep of its tail, the creature cleared a path through the swamp. As we moved forward, I noticed the water beginning to glow with an otherworldly light. Sam, Tommy said, his voice hushed with awe. Look at the water. It's changing. He was right. The murky swamp water was becoming clearer, more crystalline. As we watched, it began to rise up around us, forming walls and corridors. It's creating a maze, I realized. This must be part of the test. A disembodied voice, similar to the one we'd heard at the first node, echoed through the watery corridors. To reach the heart of the node, you must navigate the maze of reflection. But beware, the path you seek may not be what it appears. Tommy and I exchanged glances. What do you think that means? He asked. I'm not sure, I admitted. But we'll figure it out together. Come on. We entered the maze, our reflections distorted in the liquid walls around us. Every turn seemed to lead to a dead end. Every corridor looked identical to the last. After what felt like hours of wandering, frustration began to set in. This is impossible, Tommy groaned. We're never going to find the center. I leaned against one of the watery walls, trying to think. As my hand touched the surface, I felt a strange sensation, like my mind was being pulled in two directions at once. Tommy, I said slowly, an idea forming. I think I know what the voice meant about the path not being what it appears. We're not supposed to find our way through the maze. We're supposed to go through it. My brother looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Through it? Sam, these are walls. Made of water, sure, but still walls. Trust me, I said, holding out my hand. Together? Tommy hesitated for a moment, then nodded, taking my hand. Together. Taking a deep breath, I focused on the gateway stone in my pocket, feeling its energy pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. Then, with a silent prayer, I stepped forward, directly into the watery wall. For a moment, there was resistance, like pushing through a thick gel. Then suddenly, we were through, emerging into a vast circular chamber. In the center stood a pedestal, atop which rested another keystone, identical to the one we'd seen in the first node. We did it, Tommy exclaimed, his voice echoing in the chamber. But our celebration was short-lived. The water around us began to churn and rise, forming into humanoid shapes. Your final test awaits, the disembodied voice announced. To activate the node, you must confront that which lies within yourselves. The watery figure solidified, and I gasped in shock. We were staring at perfect replicas of ourselves, down to the smallest detail. Our doppelgangers spoke in unison, their voices eerily familiar. We are your doubts, your fears, your weaknesses. Overcome us and the node is yours. As our watery twins advanced, weapons raised, I felt a moment of panic. How were we supposed to fight ourselves? But then I remembered Zarthul's teachings about the nature of the multiverse, about the interconnectedness of all things. These weren't our enemies. They were parts of ourselves we needed to accept and integrate. Tommy, I called out, an idea forming. Don't fight them, embrace them. My brother looked at me like I was crazy, but as his doppelganger swung at him, he took a deep breath and stepped forward, arms open. I did the same, facing my watery self without fear. As we made contact, I felt a rush of emotions, all my doubts, fears, and insecurities flooding through me. But instead of being overwhelmed, I accepted them, acknowledging them as part of who I was. There was a blinding flash of light, and when it faded, our doppelgangers were gone. The keystone on the pedestal glowed brightly, humming with power. The second node is activated, the voice announced. You have proven yourselves worthy guardians. As the watery chamber began to dissolve around us, returning us to the swamp, I turned to Tommy. His face was pale, but there was a new strength. The sun was dipping below the horizon as Tommy and I approached the location of the second gateway node. According to Zarthul's map, it was hidden beneath an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of our town. The decaying buildings loomed before us, their shadows stretching long in the fading light. "I don't like this, Sam," Tommy muttered, his eyes darting nervously around the empty lot. "It feels wrong." I nodded, feeling the same sense of unease. The gateway stone in my pocket was vibrating with an intensity I hadn't felt before, almost as if it was trying to warn us of something. "Stay alert," I whispered. "Remember what Zarthul said. Each node has its own defenses and challenges." We made our way through the maze of abandoned warehouses, our footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. Suddenly, a loud clang rang out, making us both jump. "What was that?" Tommy hissed, his hand tightening on his weapon. Before I could answer, a mechanical whirring filled the air. From the shadows emerged a group of robots, their designs unlike anything I'd ever seen on Earth. Their eyes glowed with an ominous red light as they surrounded us. "Intruders detected," one of them announced in a metallic voice. "Surrender or be neutralized." My mind raced. These had to be part of the node's defense system, but how were we supposed to prove we were friendly? "Wait!" I called out, an idea forming. "We're here to activate the node. We have the gateway stone." I pulled out the stone, holding it up for the robots to see. Its glow intensified, pulsing in a rhythmic pattern. The robots paused, their mechanical eyes fixed on the stone. After a tense moment, they lowered their weapons. "Gateway signature recognized," the lead robot announced. "Follow us to the node chamber." Tommy let out a relieved breath. "Quick thinking, bro," he whispered as we followed our mechanical guides. The robots led us to what looked like an old elevator shaft. As we stepped inside, the floor began to descend rapidly. We dropped deeper and deeper, the air growing cooler and damper. Finally, the elevator came to a stop, and the doors opened to reveal a vast underground chamber. In its center stood a massive machine, pulsing with energy. "Whoa," Tommy breathed, his eyes wide with awe. As we approached the machine, a holographic interface flickered to life. Symbols and diagrams I didn't recognize scrolled across the screen. "What now?" Tommy asked, looking to me for guidance. I studied the interface, trying to make sense of it. I think we need to input some kind of code or sequence." Just then, my communication device buzzed. It was a message from Zarthul. "The node's activation sequence is tied to Earth's history. You must input key dates that shaped your world." "Earth's history?" Tommy groaned. "I thought we left pop quizzes behind when we became interdimensional guardians." Despite the gravity of our situation, I couldn't help but chuckle. "Come on, Tommy. Think back to all those history classes we suffered through. What dates do you remember?" Together, we began inputting dates. 1776 for American independence, 1945 for the end of World War II, 1969 for the moon landing. With each correct entry, the machine hummed louder, its energy output increasing. But as we neared the end of the sequence, an alarm suddenly blared through the chamber. "Warning," the mechanical voice of the defense system announced. "Nexus infiltration detected. Security protocols activated." The room began to shake, and panels in the wall slid open to reveal more robotic defenders. "Sam!" Tommy yelled over the noise. "What do we do?" I gritted my teeth, my mind racing. "Keep inputting dates, I'll hold them off." As Tommy continued with the activation sequence, I raised my weapon, facing off against the oncoming robots. The training Zarthul had given us kicked in, and I found myself moving with a speed and precision I never knew I possessed. Energy bolts flew back and forth across the chamber. I ducked and weaved, taking down robot after robot, but more kept coming. "Hurry, Tommy!" I shouted, feeling my strength beginning to wane. "I'm trying," he called back, his fingers flying over the interface. Just one more. Got it. The moment the final date was entered, a pulse of energy erupted from the central machine. The remaining robots froze in place, then collapsed to the ground, deactivated. A new hologram appeared, showing a map of Earth with a glowing point at our location. Node activated, a voice announced. Earth's defense grid at 66% capacity. I slumped to the ground, exhausted but relieved. Tommy rushed over, helping me to my feet. "We did it," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "That was amazing, Sam. You were like a real-life action hero." I managed a weak smile. "We both were, Tommy. Couldn't have done it without you." As we made our way back to the surface, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The Nexus infiltration of the node systems was worrying. How much did they know about Earth's defenses? "We need to contact Zarthul," I said as we emerged from the complex. "The Nexus might be closer than we thought." Tommy nodded, his expression serious. "One more node to go. Let's hope it's easier than this one." As we set off towards our final destination, the sky above us flickered with strange lights. The invasion was drawing near, and time was running out. Our greatest challenge yet lay ahead, and the fate of Earth, of all reality, hung in the balance. The night sky was ablaze with otherworldly lights as Tommy and I raced towards the location of the final gateway node. We had received an urgent message from Zarthul. The Nexus invasion force had accelerated its approach. We now had less than 6 hours before they reached Earth. "Sam," Tommy panted as we ran, "do you think we'll make it in time?" I glanced at my younger brother, seeing the fear and determination warring in his eyes. "We have to," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We're Earth's last hope." According to Zarthul's map, the final node was hidden deep within an ancient Native American burial ground. As we approached the sacred site, an eerie stillness fell over us. The very air seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, a voice echoed around us, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Who dares to enter this hallowed ground?" I stepped forward, holding the gateway stone aloft. "We are the guardians of Earth," I announced, my voice steadier than I expected. "We seek to activate the final node to protect our world from invasion." There was a moment of silence, then the air before us shimmered. A figure materialized, a Native American elder, his form translucent and glowing with an inner light. "The spirits have foretold your coming," the apparition said, his voice resonating with ancient wisdom. "But to access the power hidden here, you must prove your worth. Are you prepared to face the trial?" Tommy and I exchanged a determined look. "We are," we said in unison. The spirit nodded, and the world around us began to shift and change. We found ourselves standing in a vast ethereal plain, surrounded by swirling mists. "To activate the node," the spirit explained, "you must journey through the realms of past, present, and future. In each, you will face a challenge that will test your courage, wisdom, and heart." Before we could respond, the mists parted, revealing a portal of swirling energy. "The past awaits," the spirit intoned. "Enter, and face the echoes of history." Taking a deep breath, Tommy and I stepped through the portal. We emerged onto a battlefield, the air thick with smoke and the sounds of conflict. "The Civil War," I gasped, recognizing the uniforms of the soldiers around us. A wounded soldier stumbled towards us, his eyes wide with pain and fear. "Help me," he pleaded, reaching out a bloodied hand. Tommy moved to assist him, but I held him back. "Wait," I cautioned. "Remember what the spirit said? This is a test." We watched as more wounded soldiers appeared, all begging for our help. It took every ounce of willpower not to intervene. "We can't just do nothing," Tommy argued, his voice thick with emotion. "We have to," I replied, though it pained me to say it. "We can't change the past. Our mission is to save the future." As soon as I spoke these words, the scene faded away. We found ourselves back in the ethereal plane, the spirit nodding in approval. "You have shown wisdom in the face of past sorrows," he said. "Now, face the challenges of the present." The next portal took us to a city street. All around us, people walked by, their eyes glued to their phones, oblivious to the world around them. "What's the challenge here?" Tommy whispered. Before I could answer, we heard a cry for help. In an alley nearby, a man was being mugged. Yet the passers-by continued on, either not noticing or choosing to ignore the situation. "We have to help him," Tommy insisted, already moving towards the alley. This time I didn't hold him back. Together we rushed to confront the mugger. It was a brief struggle, but our training paid off. We subdued the attacker and helped the victim to safety. As the scene faded, the spirit's voice echoed around us. "You have shown courage in the face of present apathy. But the greatest challenge lies ahead. Are you prepared to face the future?" The final portal shimmered before us. Tommy gripped my hand tightly. "Whatever happens, we face it together," he said. I nodded, and we stepped through. We emerged into a wasteland. The sky was dark with ash, the ground barren and cracked. In the distance, we could see the ruins of what had once been a great city. "Is this—" Tommy's voice faltered. "Earth," I finished grimly. "If we fail." A holographic image appeared before us, a recording of a haggard-looking man. "If you're seeing this," the recording said, "then there's still hope. The Nexus has all but won, but there's a chance to change this future. In the ruins of the old capital, there's a device, a temporal disruptor. If activated, it could undo the invasion. But the journey there is perilous, and the device requires a great sacrifice to power it." The recording faded, leaving us with a choice. Attempt the dangerous journey to possibly save the world, or return to our own time with the knowledge of what might come to pass. Tommy looked at me, his expression resolute. "We have to try, Sam, no matter the cost." I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and fear. Together, then, to the end. As we set off towards the ruined city, facing unknown dangers and an impossible choice, I realized that this was the true test. Not just of our courage or wisdom, but of our commitment to our mission. The spirit's voice echoed one last time as the scene began to fade. "You have shown the courage to face an uncertain future, the wisdom to learn from the past, and the heart to act in the present. The final node is yours to activate." We found ourselves back in the burial ground, the gateway stone glowing brightly in my hand. Before us, a hidden door in an ancient mound slid open, revealing the final node. As we approached to activate it, a distant rumble shook the ground. I looked up to see the night sky torn apart by the arrival of the Nexus invasion fleet. "It's time," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Ready to save the world, little brother?" Tommy grinned, a mix of excitement and determination on his face. "Born ready. Let's show these interdimensional invaders what the Andersons are made of." With the fate of Earth hanging in the balance, we stepped forward to face our destiny. The final battle was about to begin, and we were Earth's last line of defense. The ground trembled beneath our feet as we approached the final node. The sky above was a maelstrom of swirling energy and alien ships, the Nexus invasion force having breached Earth's atmosphere. We had mere minutes left. "Sam," Tommy's voice was tight with tension, "what if this doesn't work? What if we activate all the nodes and it's not enough?" I placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "Then we'll find another way. We always do." As we reached the ancient mound housing the node, a familiar shimmer in the air announced Zarthol's arrival. Our alien mentor's form was flickering, a sign of the immense energy being expended to maintain contact. "Young Guardians," Zarthol's mental voice was strained, "you must hurry. The Nexus fleet is larger than we anticipated. Earth's conventional defenses are already failing." I nodded grimly, pulling out the gateway stone. It pulsed with an intensity I'd never felt before, almost burning in my hand. "What do we need to do?" Zarthol gestured towards an indent in the mound's surface, perfectly shaped to fit the stone. "Insert the key, and channel your combined energy into it. The node will recognize you as Earth's chosen protectors." Tommy and I exchanged a determined look. This was it. The moment everything had been leading up to. I placed the stone into the indent, and together, we laid our hands upon it. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Energy surged through us, more powerful than anything we'd experienced before. I felt as if I was being torn apart and put back together, my consciousness expanding to encompass the entire planet. Through this new, expanded awareness, I could see the other nodes activating, feel the ancient defense grid coming to life. But I could also sense the Nexus fleet, a vast, malevolent presence bearing down on us. "It's not enough," I gasped, the words barely audible over the roar of power surrounding us. "The grid, it's not strong enough to repel them." Tommy's face was contorted with effort, but his voice was steady. "Then we push harder. Give it everything we've got." We poured more of ourselves into the stone, our life force merging with the ancient technology. In my mind's eye, I could see the defense grid strengthening, a shimmering shield beginning to envelop the planet. But the Nexus wasn't giving up. Their ships unleashed a barrage of energy weapons pounding against the forming shield. Cracks began to appear, spreading like a spiderweb across the globe. "We can't hold it," Tommy cried out, his body shaking with the strain. Just when it seemed we would be overwhelmed, a new presence made itself known. The spirit of the Native American elder we'd encountered earlier materialized beside us, along with countless other spectral forms. "You are not alone, young guardians." The elder's voice resonated in our minds. "The spirits of this land stand with you. Let our strength be yours." A surge of energy unlike anything I'd ever felt flowed through us. The spirits of countless generations, all those who had lived and died on this land, lent us their power. The defense grid flared with renewed strength, the cracks sealing themselves. The Nexus fleet, caught off guard by this sudden resurgence, faltered in their attack. Several of their ships, pushed back by the expanding shield, collided with each other in brilliant explosions. "It's working!" Tommy shouted, a note of triumph in his voice. But our victory was short-lived. The Nexus, recovering from their initial setback, redoubled their efforts. A massive cannon on their flagship began to charge, its power readings off the charts. Zarthul's mental voice cut through the chaos. "They're preparing to fire the Void Cannon. If it hits, it will tear a hole in reality itself." Panic threatened to overwhelm me. How could we possibly stand against such a weapon? Then, in a moment of clarity, I remembered the lessons of our journey. The wisdom of the past, the courage to act in the present, and the sacrifice needed to secure the future. "Tommy," I said, my voice calm despite the maelstrom around us, "I know what we have to do." My brother met my gaze, understanding dawning in his eyes. Without a word, he nodded. Together, we pushed beyond our limits, channeling not just our energy, but our very essence into the defense grid. I felt myself beginning to fade, my consciousness spreading thin across the barrier. The Void Cannon fired, a beam of unlight that seemed to devour everything in its path. It struck our shield with a force that shook the foundations of reality. For a moment that stretched into eternity, we hung in the balance between existence and oblivion. Then, with a final surge of will, we pushed back. The Void Cannon's beam refracted off our shield, turned back upon the Nexus fleet. Ships began to disintegrate, pulled apart by the very forces they had sought to control. As the flagship itself began to crumble, a cheer went up from the spirits around us. The invasion had been thwarted. Slowly, painfully, I felt myself being pulled back into my body. The world came into focus around me, and I found myself lying on the ground next to Tommy, both of us gasping for air. Zarthul hovered over us, its form more solid now. "It is done," our mentor said, a note of awe in its mental voice. "Earth is safe. You have done what many thought impossible." As the realization of our victory sank in, I looked at Tommy. My little brother grinned back at me, exhausted but triumphant. "We did it, Sam," he wheezed. "We actually saved the world." I laughed, on hysterical with relief and lingering adrenaline. "Yeah, we did. although I think we might have missed more than a few days of school. As we lay there, the first rays of dawn breaking over a world forever, I knew that our adventure was far from over. We had saved Earth, but the multiverse was vast, and the Nexus threat was not entirely eliminated, but for now, in this moment, we had won. Earth was safe, and two ordinary had proven that with courage, determination, and a little interdimensional help, anything was possible. The future, with all its uncertainty and promise, awaited us. And whatever it might bring, I it together. Days following our victory over the Nexus were a blur of debriefings, medical checkups, and hushed conversations with government officials. Tommy and I found ourselves at the center of a storm of attention, saviors of Earth, but as the adrenaline of our battle faded, the weight of our experience began to settle in. It was a warm afternoon when we finally got a moment to ourselves. We sat on the porch of our family home, the normality of the scene at odds with the extraordinary events we'd been through. "Do you think things will ever go back to normal?" Tommy asked, his eyes fixed on the neighbors mowing their lawn across the street. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm not sure normal exists for us anymore, little brother." Just then, a shimmering in the air announced Zarthul's arrival. Our alien mentor materialized before us, its form more solid than we'd ever seen it on Earth. "Young Guardians," Zarthul greeted us, its mental voice tinged with a mixture of pride and concern. "How are you faring?" "We're adjusting," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "It's strange, knowing what we know now, seeing the world the way we do now." Tommy nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's like everyone's just going about their day, but we know what's really out there. What almost happened." Zarthul's form rippled in what we'd come to recognize as a sign of empathy. The burden of knowledge is not an easy one to bear, but bear it you must, for your journey is far from over. I sat up straighter, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through me. "What do you mean? The Nexus is defeated, isn't it?" "The immediate threat to Earth has been neutralized," Zarthul confirmed. "But the Nexus is vast, spanning multiple dimensions. What you faced was but a fraction of their forces." Tommy leaned forward, his eyes wide. "So what happens now? Do we just wait for the next invasion?" Zarthul's form shimmered, and suddenly we were no longer on our porch but standing in what appeared to be a vast, otherworldly command center. Holographic displays showed star systems and dimensional rifts I couldn't begin to comprehend. "Welcome," Zarthul said, "to the headquarters of the Interdimensional Defense Force." As we gaped at our surroundings, a diverse group of beings began to materialize around us. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien I could barely process what I was seeing. Samantha and Thomas Anderson, a tall, ethereal being, stepped forward, its voice resonating in our minds. "I am High Commander Azura. Your actions in defense of Earth have not gone unnoticed. We would like to formally invite you to join our ranks." Tommy and I exchanged stunned looks. "Join you?" I managed to stammer out. "But we're just kids from Earth. We barely understand what's going on." A being that looked like a sentient crystal chimed in, its voice a melodious tinkle. "You underestimate yourselves. You have shown courage, resourcefulness, and an ability to manipulate interdimensional energies that is rare, even among our seasoned operatives." "But what about our lives on Earth?" Tommy asked, his voice small. "Our family, our friends?" Azura's expression softened, or at least I thought it did. It was hard to tell with a being made primarily of light. "We understand the sacrifice we are asking of you, but know this. By joining us, you will be in a position to protect not just Earth, but countless other worlds." I felt a hand slip into mine and looked down to see Tommy, his face set with determination. "We're in this together, right, Sam?" he said, squeezing my hand. I squeezed back, feeling a surge of pride for my little brother. "Together," I agreed, then turned to face Azura and the assembled aliens. "We accept your offer." The room erupted in a cacophony of alien cheers and congratulations. As beings of all shapes and sizes crowded around us, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see a humanoid figure with iridescent skin and eyes like swirling galaxies. "I'm Lyra," she said, her voice like music. "I'll be overseeing your training. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet." As Lyra began to outline the basics of our upcoming training regimen, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. We were about to embark on an adventure beyond anything we could have imagined. "Oh," Lyra added with a mischievous glint in her starry eyes, "and you might want to brush up on your quantum physics. It'll come in handy for navigating the time streams." Tommy groaned good-naturedly, and here I thought we were done with homework. As laughter rippled through the group, I couldn't help but smile. Our lives had changed forever, but some things, like Tommy's aversion to studying, remained comfortingly familiar. The holographic displays around us shifted, showing glimpses of alien worlds, futuristic cities, and cosmic phenomena I couldn't begin to name. Our new reality stretched out before us, full of endless possibilities and untold dangers. But as I stood there, my brother by my side, and our new allies all around us, I knew that whatever the multiverse might throw at us, we were ready to face it. Our greatest adventure was just beginning. The simulated sun of the training arena blazed overhead as Tommy and I crouched behind a boulder, our breath coming in short gasps. It had been 6 months since we joined the Interdimensional Defense Force, and our lives had become a whirlwind of intense training and mind-bending lessons. "On your left," Tommy shouted, his eyes wide with alarm. I spun, raising my hand instinctively. A bolt of pure energy shot from my palm, colliding with the holographic Nexus drone that had been sneaking up on us. The drone flickered and disappeared. "Nice shot," Tommy grinned, his own hands glowing with barely contained power. "But I bet I can take out more than you in the next wave." I couldn't help but smile at my brother's competitive spirit. "You're on, little bro." As if on cue, the air around us shimmered, and a new swarm of Nexus drones materialized. We leapt into action, our movements fluid and synchronized after months of rigorous training. Energy bolts flew from our hands, each one finding its mark with uncanny precision. Just as we thought we had the upper hand, the ground beneath our feet began to shift. The rocky terrain of the training arena morphed into a dense jungle, the sudden change nearly throwing us off balance. "Adapting to rapid environmental shifts," came Lyra's voice over the arena's communication system. "Remember your lessons on quantum flux stabilization." I gritted my teeth, focusing on the techniques we'd learned. The disorientation began to fade as I attuned myself to the new surroundings. Beside me, I could see Tommy doing the same, his eyes closed in concentration. "I've got this," he muttered, and suddenly vines sprang from the jungle floor, ensnaring several drones. "Show off," I laughed, before unleashing a wave of energy that short-circuited the remaining enemies. As the last drone fell, the jungle faded away, leaving us standing in the neutral white space of the deactivated training arena. Lyra materialized before us, her starry eyes twinkling with approval. "Impressive," she nodded. "Your ability to manipulate interdimensional energies is progressing faster than we anticipated. But remember, raw power isn't everything. Strategy and teamwork are just as important." Tommy and I exchanged a look. We'd learned early on that Lyra's compliments were usually followed by a new, more difficult challenge. "So, what's next?" I asked, trying to keep the apprehension out of my voice. "Another round with the drones?" Lyra's lips curled into a smile that was both exciting and terrifying. "Oh no, nothing so simple. It's time for your first field mission." My heart skipped a beat. We'd been training for this moment, but the reality of it still sent a jolt of nervous energy through me. Are we ready?" Tommy asked, his earlier bravado replaced by a hint of uncertainty. Lyra's expression softened. "You've both come a long way since you first arrived. Trust in your training, in each other, and in yourselves. You're as ready as you'll ever be." She waved her hand, and a holographic star map appeared between us. "We've detected Nexus activity in the Andromeda Galaxy, specifically on a planet called Zerax. Your mission is to infiltrate a Nexus outpost and gather intelligence on their plans. As Lyra briefed us on the details of our mission, I felt a mix of excitement and fear churning in my stomach. This was real. We were about to step onto an alien world, face real danger, not just simulations. One more thing, Lyra added, her tone serious. You'll be working with a new team member on this mission. The High Council feels you're ready for more diverse collaboration. On cue, a figure shimmered into existence beside Lyra. My jaw dropped. Standing before us was what could only be described as a sentient nebula, its form constantly shifting in a swirl of cosmic gases and newborn stars. This is Zephyr, Lyra introduced. They're an astral being from the Carina Nebula. Their unique abilities will be crucial for this mission. Greetings, young ones. Zephyr's voice resonated in our minds, sounding like the harmonious whisper of stellar winds. I look forward to working with Earth's champions. Tommy and I exchanged wide-eyed looks of amazement. Just when we thought we were getting used to the wonders of the multiverse, something like this happened. The transport to Zarax leaves in 1 hour, Lyra announced. Prepare yourselves. And remember, this isn't a training exercise. The dangers you'll face are very real. As Lyra and Zephyr left to make final preparations, Tommy turned to me, his expression a mix of excitement and nervousness that I'm sure mirrored my own. Sam, he said, his voice quiet, do you ever miss home? Our old life? I put a hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with being the older sibling. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember what we're fighting for. All those people back on Earth going about their daily lives never knowing how close they came to annihilation. We're protecting them, Tommy. We're protecting everyone. Tommy nodded, squaring his shoulders. You're right. We've got a job to do. As we left the training arena to gear up for our mission, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. We'd come so far from those two kids in a small town who stumbled upon an alien artifact. Now we were about to embark on our first real mission as members of the Interdimensional Defense Force. Whatever challenges awaited us on Zarax, whatever plans the Nexus had in store, we would face them together. The fate of not just Earth but countless worlds across the multiverse rested in our hands. And we were ready. The swirling vortex of the interdimensional portal subsided, leaving Tommy, Zephyr, and me standing on the alien soil of Zarax. The planet's twin moons hung low in a lavender sky, casting an eerie glow over a landscape of twisted metallic vegetation. Whoa, Tommy breathed, his eyes wide as he took in our surroundings. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. I nodded, trying to quell the butterflies in my stomach. This was it, our first real mission. Remember the briefing, I said, activating the holographic map on my wrist device. The Nexus outpost should be about 2 clicks north of our position. Zephyr's nebulous form shimmered, stars twinkling within their gaseous body. I sense no immediate danger, but we must proceed with caution. The Nexus has ways of cloaking their presence from even the most advanced detection systems. We set off across the alien terrain, our footsteps muffled by the strange, spongy ground. The metallic plants seemed to shy away as we passed, their leaves emitting a soft, bell-like chime. As we neared the coordinates of the Nexus outpost, a massive structure loomed before us. It was a towering fortress of black metal and pulsing energy fields, practically screaming, "Evil alien base." Okay, I whispered, crouching behind a large mushroom-like growth. We need to find a way inside without triggering any alarms. Any ideas? Tommy's eyes lit up. Remember that phase-shifting technique Lyra taught us last week? We could try that to pass through the outer walls. I hesitated. I don't know, Tommy. We've only practiced that in simulations. If we mess it up here... Young ones, Zephyr interjected, their voice a soothing cosmic whisper in our minds. Perhaps I can be of assistance. My nebulous form allows me to create temporary gaps in energy fields. I can open a path for us. Grateful for Zephyr's help, we watched in awe as our astral companion floated towards the fortress. Tendrils of cosmic gas reached out, intertwining with the energy barrier. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like a gentle sigh, a shimmer appeared in the field, a doorway just large enough for us to pass through. "Quickly," Zephyr urged. "I cannot maintain this for long." Tommy and I darted forward, slipping through the gap. The moment we were inside, the energy field snapped back into place. The interior of the fortress was a maze of dark corridors and pulsing machinery. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, and the air hummed with an energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "We need to find their main computer core," I whispered, consulting the schematics on my wrist device. "It should be at the center of the complex." As we crept through the hallways, avoiding patrolling Nexus drones, I couldn't help but feel a sense of surreal disbelief. Here we were, two kids from Earth, sneaking through an alien fortress on a distant planet. If someone had told me this would be my life a year ago, I would have thought they were crazy. Suddenly, Tommy grabbed my arm, pulling me into a shadowy alcove. A group of Nexus soldiers marched past, their armor gleaming in the low light. "That was close," Tommy breathed once they had passed. "Hey, Sam, do you ever wonder if Mom and Dad would be proud of us if they knew what we were doing?" The question caught me off guard. In the whirlwind of our new life, I hadn't thought much about our parents lately. I think they would be," I said softly. "They always taught us to stand up for what's right, to help others. That's what we're doing now, just on a much bigger scale." Tommy nodded, a small smile on his face. "Yeah, you're right. Though I bet Mom would still tell us to be careful and not forget to eat our vegetables." We shared a quiet laugh, the moment of normalcy oddly comforting in our extraordinary surroundings. "Young Guardians," Zephyr's voice interrupted our nostalgia. "I believe I have located the central computer core. However, there appears to be a significant Nexus presence in that area." Following Zephyr's lead, we soon found ourselves peering into a vast chamber. At its center stood a pillar of swirling energy, the computer core. But between us and our goal were at least a dozen Nexus soldiers and several hovering defense drones. "Okay," I whispered, my mind racing. "We need a distraction. Something to draw them away from the core so one of us can access it." Tommy's eyes lit up with that look that always meant he had a crazy idea. "What if we use that energy manipulation technique we've been practicing? Create a sort of interdimensional light show to confuse them?" I bit my lip, considering. It was risky, but it just might work. "All right, but be careful. We don't want to alert the entire base." As Tommy prepared to put his plan into action, Zephyr spoke up. "I can assist in amplifying the effect. My cosmic energies should interact interestingly with your manipulation." With a nod, Tommy stepped forward, his hands beginning to glow with gathered energy. Zephyr's form expanded, tendrils of starry gas intertwining with the light emanating from Tommy's palms. The result was spectacular. The chamber erupted in a dazzling display of light and color, swirling patterns that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The Nexus forces reacted with confusion, their ordered ranks dissolving into chaos. "Now's our chance," I hissed, darting towards the computer core. As I ran, I marveled at how far we'd come. The powers we now wielded would have seemed impossible mere months ago. Reaching the core, I pulled out a data crystal, a piece of technology so advanced it made Earth supercomputers look like abacuses. As I worked to download the Nexus plans, I could hear the commotion behind me growing. "Sam, hurry!" Tommy's strained voice reached me. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." My fingers flew over the alien interface, willing the download to go faster. Just as alarms began to blare throughout the fortress, the crystal pulsed, signaling the completion of the data transfer. "I got it," I shouted. "Let's get out of here." As we ran for the exit, Nexus forces hot on our heels, I clutched the data crystal tightly. Whatever secrets it held, whatever nefarious plans the Nexus had in store, we now had a chance to stop them. Our first real mission was a success. but I had a feeling it was just the beginning of an even greater adventure. The multiverse was vast, and the Nexus threat loomed large, but with each other, our growing powers, and allies like Zephyr by our side, I knew we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As we neared the extraction point, the lavender sky of Zarax giving way to the swirling energies of an interdimensional portal, I couldn't help but grin. This was our life now, extraordinary, dangerous, and more amazing than I could have ever imagined. The debriefing room at Interdimensional Defense Force headquarters buzzed with tension as Tommy, Zephyr, and I stood before the High Council. The data crystal we'd retrieved from Zarax glowed softly on the central console, its contents now laid bare for all to see. High Commander Azura's ethereal form shimmered with barely contained energy. "You've done well, young Guardians. The intelligence you've gathered is troubling, to say the least." Lyra stepped forward, her starry eyes serious. "The Nexus isn't just planning another invasion. They're attempting to create a cosmic convergence device." "A what now?" Tommy asked, voicing the confusion I felt. A holographic display sprang to life, showing a complex mechanism that hurt my eyes to look at directly. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. "A cosmic convergence device," Zephyr explained, their nebulous form swirling with concern, "is a theoretical weapon capable of collapsing multiple realities into a single point. The destruction would be unimaginable." I felt a chill run down my spine. But why? What could they possibly gain from that kind of devastation? Azura's voice was grim. "Control. By collapsing realities, they aim to remake the multiverse in their image. A singular reality, with the Nexus at its helm." The room fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over us. The stakes had just gotten exponentially higher. Tommy's voice was small when he finally spoke. "So, what do we do?" Lyra's expression softened. "We fight back. The plans you retrieved give us a chance. We know where they're constructing the device. A place called the Void Nexus, a pocket dimension at the crossroads of multiple realities. Your mission," Azura continued, "should you choose to accept it, will be to infiltrate the Void Nexus and destroy the cosmic convergence device before it can be activated." I exchanged a look with Tommy. The fear in his eyes mirrored my own, but there was determination there too. We both knew there was only one answer we could give. "We're in," I said, squaring my shoulders. "Whatever it takes." Azura nodded, a hint of pride in their luminous eyes. "Very well. But this mission will require more than just the two of you. We're assembling a special task force, the best operatives from across the multiverse." As if on cue, the doors to the debriefing room slid open. 5 figures entered, each more extraordinary than the last. "Meet your new team," Lyra announced. A tall, graceful being with skin like polished obsidian stepped forward. "I am Nexila, master of shadow manipulation from the Umbra realm." Next came a creature that seemed to be made entirely of living crystal. "Prism," it said simply, its voice ringing like chimes. "Lightbender and energy focuser." A being that looked almost human, save for the crackling electrical aura surrounding them, gave a casual salute. "Nova here. Cosmic storm surfer and living battery at your service." The fourth member was a small, unassuming creature that reminded me of a cross between a fox and a squirrel. "I'm Whisper," it said, its voice surprisingly deep. "Stealth and infiltration specialist." Finally, a towering figure covered in iridescent scales nodded to us. "I am Cathara, chronokinetic warrior from the temporal tides." Tommy and I stood there, awestruck. These beings were legends in the IDF, operatives whose missions were the stuff of hushed whispers and awed retellings in the academy. "Together," Azura said, "you will be our best hope at stopping the Nexus once and for all." As the reality of our mission sank in, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. We were about to embark on the most dangerous and important task of our lives. "The fate of the multiverse rests in your hands," Lyra said solemnly. You leave for the Void Nexus in 12 hours. Prepare yourselves well. As we filed out of the debriefing room, Tommy pulled me aside, his face a mix of emotions. "Sam," he whispered, "do you think we're ready for this? I mean, look at our team. They're all so incredible, and we're just the kids who saved Earth and have been training nonstop for months?" I finished for him, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Tommy, we've earned our place on this team. We can do this." He nodded, a small smile forming. "You're right. It's all so big, you know? The whole multiverse depending on us." "I know," I agreed. "But remember what Dad always used to say? Even the biggest problems are solved one step at a time. We'll figure this out together." As we made our way to the preparation area, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. From small-town kids to interdimensional guardians, about to embark on a mission to save all of reality. It was terrifying, yes, but also thrilling beyond belief. The next 12 hours were a whirlwind of activity, advanced weapons training, strategy sessions, and crash courses in void dimension survival techniques. Through it all, our new team began to gel, each member's unique abilities complementing the others in ways I couldn't have imagined. As the departure time drew near, I found myself standing before a window, gazing out at the swirling cosmic energies that surrounded IDF headquarters. The enormity of our task weighed heavily on me. "Nervous?" a voice asked. I turned to see Nova, the cosmic storm surfer floating nearby. "Terrified," I admitted, "but ready." Nova grinned, electricity crackling around them. "That's the spirit, kid. Fear keeps you sharp. Just remember, out there in the Void Nexus, we've only got each other. Trust your team, trust your training, and trust yourself." As Nova drifted away, I took a deep breath, centering myself. Whatever challenges lay ahead in the Void Nexus, whatever the Nexus threw at us, we would face it together. The multiverse was counting on us, and we wouldn't let it down. The mission of our lives was about to begin, and despite the fear, I couldn't wait to dive in.